Welcome back. We've taken the liberty of keeping the good doctor with us in studio for at least the next half hour, simply because diabetes awareness is such an important issue, and we're trying to do our bit, our social responsibility bit here at ITV by giving you as much information as possible, and also to create awareness around this very, very important issue, and that is diabetes. And as you've heard through Dr. Pubala Naidu, that when we talk diabetes, we're not just talking issues around too much sugar in your diet. It impacts all of your major organs in the body, and you could go blind, you could, you could have a heart attack, you could have a stroke, and oftentimes we hear of a diabetic patient dying, and then we are told, oh, it was a heart attack, and imagine he or she had diabetes, but he died of a stroke or a heart attack, and we don't make the correlation, thinking that it was the diabetes that went untreated perhaps, or was not well managed. That is why the person then presented with a stroke or a heart attack and died. Would I be correct?
No, absolutely. So diabetes is a major risk factor for blood vessel disease.
As
right?
You said, yes.
Yes. So you got blood vessels in your brain, going to your heart, to your kidneys, and to your legs as well, and also to the eyes, right? So when you have diabetes, your sugar goes up, and as you said, if it's not controlled over a period of time, you start to have the complications. So you start to have strokes. You can get something called diabetic retinopathy, where the blood vessels, the little blood vessels in your eyes start to get damaged, and you can actually go blind.
Gradually or almost overnight?
It's gradual, right? So if your sugar goes very high, you can get blurred vision acutely, right? But in terms of proper blindness and impaired vision, it's with time, chronic, so around 10, 15 years, of having uncontrolled diabetes. And then your heart attacks can be sudden as well, and you get demise from your heart attack, and you can get kidney failure. I mean, diabetes is one of the biggest causes.
And not making the link that it was because of the poorly managed diabetes.
That's it. It's not really just about the sugar. It's about what these high levels of sugar can do to these important parts of your body to cause the strokes, the heart attacks, the kidney disease, and the peripheral vascular disease. Those are the killers. Those are the things that impair the patient's lives, Those are the things that result in amputations, blindness. Patients need to be going on dialysis, and even patients dying.
What's the link with the dialysis issue?
Yeah. So with diabetes, you get damage of the blood vessels in the kidney. So the kidney doesn't work as well, so you can't really excrete all the toxins, right? And with time, if it gets bad enough, your kidney is totally dysfunctional, and you've got to put them on a machine to do the work. And it's not easy to get dialysis. Dialysis is not cheap, and especially in the public sector, the slots for dialysis is very limited. So sometimes the patient won't even have the opportunity to get dialysis.
So they'll die an untimely death.
Absolutely.
And they'll be pretty sick before they actually do die.
Yes.
All right, let's just also unpack the type 1, 2, and 3 diabetes.
Yes.
And another question, I think we need to put a bit of spotlight on infant and childhood diabetes as well. But let's start with the different types of diabetes. How do they present? Why are they classified as 1, 2, and 3? And management, is it similar?
Yeah. So the nomenclature or the naming of diabetes has changed over the years. And as you correctly pointed out, now it's type 1, type 2, type 3, and there's other types as well. So let's start with type 1 diabetes, right? So type 1 diabetes is a case where your body, so you have an organ called the pancreas, that makes insulin. And in type 1 diabetes, the pancreas doesn't make insulin anymore, right? And insulin is like a key. So you need insulin to go to the tissues where the cells are sitting, to open up the door so glucose can get into the cell, right? Because glucose is needed for energy of the cell. It's critical, right? But in type 1, because the pancreas doesn't make insulin, there's no key to open to get into the cell, so your blood sugar levels tend to increase very rapidly. An important thing about type 1 diabetic patient, they need insulin to survive.
Okay. And that is absolutely chronic. They're going to be taking insulin for the rest of their lives.
In general, yes, that's correct. With medicine, there's always exceptions, right? But for general purposes, I think for the lay persons, yes, we can say that is the case. And how it's caused, right? So type 1 diabetes is quite interesting. It's your body and your immune system, so your defense system goes a bit off. And it actually attacks your pancreas.
Almost like an autoimmune disease.
Perfect, yeah. You know, so that's what it is. It's an autoimmune disease. We think it's triggered by viral infections, right? So the virus looks similar to the pancreas in terms of the outside, and then when the body attacks them, they attack not just the virus, but it also attacks your pancreas. So it's autoimmunity.
It sounds serious. I mean, you know, we're talking type 1. I did ask you the question at the opening of the show, is there any one type that is more serious than the other? But this sounds pretty serious.
Yeah, it is. But again, so is type 2 as well. Eh? I mean, I'll tell you about that.
What's the difference? Yes.
Yeah. So type 2 diabetes mellitus is, you've got insulin in most cases, you know, so the insulin is being produced. But it's just that there's a problem with the insulin unlocking the door to the cell. Right, so the insulin is present, but the tissues are not sensitive to it. So they're resistant to the effects of insulin. And that's why the glucose cannot get into the cell.
Would the treatment modalities be similar? Or what's the difference in the two, type 1 and type 2?
Right. So for type 1, you need insulin for survival generally from the start. Right? With type 2 diabetic patients, they go through a course of getting slowly worse, right? So most of them start with tablets, be it 1, be it 2, be it 3. Then they go on to injectables like insulin, once a day to sometimes twice a day to 3 times a day.
Is that because they're not well managed, or is it just really a natural process in certain patients that's kicking in?
To some extent, it's a natural progression. It is a natural progression. With time, even though you started with enough insulin coming from your pancreas, but with times those pancreatic cells become a bit tired. So slowly they start making less insulin as well, and that's why you get you need more intensive therapy.
So I should imagine if you're suffering from type 2, if you are a model patient, if you really manage the disease well enough, hopefully it won't go to the type 1. I should imagine. It won't go to a point where you're going to need insulin as well.
Yes, absolutely. So for a type 2 diabetic patient, if you can be adherent to lifestyle modification, so moderate intensity exercise, say 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, and you consistently do that, and you have a balanced diet, appropriate diet, based on the information from a nutritionist or a dietitian, then certainly you can prevent your disease from getting worse, because by having lifestyle modification, you can almost improve the sensitivity of your tissues to insulin. So you reduce the insulin resistance, you increase insulin sensitivity,
The all-important question, and I'm a sugar addict as well, so I have to ask this question. Does ingesting too much sugar, sweets, chocolates, cakes, etc., ice creams and so forth on a regular basis possibly lead you to eventually, contracting one of, 1, 2 or 3 diabetes? Or if you're a very sporty person and you burn off enough of those, of the energy, will you not be at risk? And added to that, are we eating way too much sugar, and how detrimental is it to our health?
Yeah, so excessive consumption of sugar definitely puts you at risk.
In any form.
In any
Obviously.
form, yes, in any form. The more refined it is, the more hazard it is. So it is important for us to cut down on consuming refined sugars, because when you consume refined sugars, if I had to look at your blood sugar while you're taking in the oral ingestion of sugar, your glucose level is going to go zoop really high, and then your pancreas has to work very hard to make enough insulin to get those glucose levels down. So you're straining your pancreas, And with time, you know, the pancreatic cells are going to get tired, and then you're going to become diabetic. And with all these refined sugars, you're not only placing yourself at risk for diabetes type 2, but also you're putting yourself at risk for obesity, which is a killer on its own, you know. Forget about all the other cardiovascular risk factors. So it's a serious thing. And in terms of exercising, so if you consume tons of sugar and you exercise, you know, like an elite athlete, yeah, sure, you might have a chance of not being at risk of diabetes. But I promise you, the average person will not be able to exercise at that intensity to burn off all that sugar, you know. So the trick is actually to reduce the consumption, right? It's about moderation. I think, especially, I mean, I'm of Indian origin, so I think some of the best foods we make are all those sweet meats, right?
The barfis and the magaj and all of that.
Nothing tastes better.
You know, and apart from all of that, I think just globally there's this big foodie culture that has come about.
Yes.
And I think we're just overindulging and creating our own problems.
Absolutely. I think there's a huge focus on food. It's become very social as well, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at Facebook and, you know, all the social media platforms. It's, you know, it's the thing now. It's all about different types of food, how it looks, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's moving us away from actually exercising, being outdoors, engaging in physical activity, right? So to add to that, I mean, if you drive around Johannesburg, for example, almost every corner there's a fast food outlet.
Oh yes, absolutely. Let's go for our final ad break for the morning. Come back, talk about type 3 diabetes. What is it? And also diabetes in children and infants.
Okay, great.
Dr. Pubala Naidu talking to us about diabetes awareness. Remember, the International Diabetes Awareness Day is marked on the 14th of November, and we here are doing our bit at ITV in bringing this very important message to you. Our final ad break on this part of the show, and we'll continue talking with Dr. Pubala Naidu. And we'll be wrapping up this part of the show, diabetes awareness, by asking the all-important questions. Of course, Dr. Naidu is going to talk about type 3 diabetes. Let's talk about the impact on oral hygiene or oral health, and also diabetes in infants and children. Over to you.
Yeah, good. So yeah, type 3 diabetes is quite an interesting condition. I think most of us are familiar with type 1 and type 2.
True.
But with type 3 diabetes, it's if you got a problem with your pancreas, for example, you've got a pancreatitis. So let's say you've taken certain medicines, herbal medicines or traditional medicines, and you damage your pancreas, then you can get type 3 diabetes.
Okay,
Not very
you said
common.
something very, very important here. A lot of us are into herbal and possibly over-the-counter alternative medicines. As a scientist, are you perhaps suggesting that we could be harming ourselves? And if so, if we're thinking we're doing more good to our bodies by taking the herbal supplements or medications, as opposed to the allopathic medicines, we're on the path to goodness. So you've got me worried by that statement.
Yeah, I think I've worked in clinical medicine for a long time, and I've seen lots of patients coming with serious conditions, liver failure, kidney failure, pancreatitis, because of ingestion of natural medicines, right? Sometimes we think natural is good, it's healthy, but remember, lots of these things are not tested, right? So the claims they make has not really been validated. You know, the safety profile has not been validated. And so personally, I prefer to use medicines that have been tested rigorously and been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, our local Medicines Control Council, you know, before I use it. Because
so it is natural or herbal on the box, or even if a practitioner gives it to you, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good for you. It might end up doing more damage.
Yes, that's correct. So just be aware of that.
Okay.
They're not tested rigorously, so we don't have all the evidence to support its use.
And thus you get the type 3 diabetes.
You could, yes, with certain types, depending on what what you've ingested. In addition, if you get pancreatic cancer, you can get type 3 diabetes as well.
Ooh, so you're having to manage 2 very chronic or dreaded conditions.
Yes, correct. And that's why when you go and get evaluated by your doctor, the doctor is not just thinking, okay, type 1 or type 2. He's also, in his back of his mind, he's thinking of other forms of diabetes. I won't go through all of them because there's a long list, but he will think of the other forms as well to try to rule out those different causes, because the management is a little bit different as well.
As far as diabetes is concerned, I think something out of mind completely is the impact on oral hygiene. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So diabetes adversely affects oral health. So you'll see a lot of the diabetic patients, they have poor dentition, they lose teeth, etc. They've got cavities, they get abscesses around.
Constantly, I should imagine.
Yes. So dental hygiene is critical for these patients, and education around that is important as well. So, the basics, brush twice a day, the correct technique as well, with the HCP, your healthcare professional can take you through. But in addition, you've got to floss your teeth, and then ideally you need a mouthwash. Even if it's just, salt water, you need something as a mouthwash as well. But just like your feet, you've got to take meticulous care of your teeth as well.
And it should, I'm sure, goes without saying that if you're a diabetic patient, when you go for a dental checkup, make sure that your dentist knows that you're a diabetic.
Yes, that's correct. It is important for the dentist to know that, because in certain cases he might think, okay, we need to prevent infections after we extract the tooth. So knowing your diabetic status is important when you go to a dentist. As for other medical conditions.
Absolutely, okay. Earlier on, off air rather,
Yes.
you and I spoke about, I asked you the question, are there instances where babies are born with diabetes, and what would be the cause? Would you like to share that with our viewers? And then diabetes in children, what happens? Let's assume the child was not born with diabetes, the child is 6 or 8, years old, and all of a sudden diabetes is picked up. What has gone wrong in that child's life that it has reached that point? So let's start with the infant, with the newborn.
Yeah. So with the newborns, for newborn screening, one of the things we do is to check the sugar in the patients, right, to see if they're diabetic. Because you can get...
Before the birth of the baby?
I know, at birth.
Oh,
so
at
the
birth,
neonate.
okay.
Yes.
So you're checking mom's sugar levels?
So we do check mom's sugar levels during the pregnancy, but as soon as baby is born, we check baby's sugar level
okay,
as
so
well.
you pick it up immediately.
Correct, right? So we screen the babies for diabetes. And so genetic disorders can result in the baby being born with diabetes mellitus.
Does that mean baby needs to be put on some form of a treatment regime then and there?
Yes, that's correct. So they will start off with therapy, and more or less they will continue with therapy for their lifespan, right? And let's look at the child that's born, that grows up, and around 6 or 7 becomes diabetic. Now, in this case, it's most likely type 1 diabetes, right? Where there's probably a virus that's come in, and there's an autoimmune problem, and the body's attacked the pancreas and resulted in type 1 diabetes. Now, so these patients...
And that would not have had anything to do with the child's diet up to that point in time?
Absolutely not, yeah. This is more autoimmune,
right.
The issue is autoimmunity as opposed to lifestyle issues. Because generally these kids, if you look at them, they're lean, they're mean, and, they've got no central adiposity. So in those patients, they type 1. We do a few tests to confirm they type 1, right? We can check antibodies against certain parts of the pancreas. And then we put those patients on insulin. And
at that tender age.
At that tender age, look, that's why the family has to be educated, and the child as well needs to be educated, and they do relatively well. And now with the improving therapies, you can have injections, and you can also put little pumps on them as well, to help control their sugars. But I must say, I just want to point out, it becomes a bit challenging to manage these kids when they transition to adolescence. because that's a phase you want to rebel and you're growing and there's hormones going crazy, etc., and it can be challenging, but it can be addressed as well. So what we try to do is we try to have peer meetings. So we get groups of youth together with diabetes so they can chat about their condition, their challenges, etc., and then better manage their diabetes going forward.
And I can imagine the difficulties there, because at that stage of your life or age of your life, you want to fit in. You don't want to be different in a weird sense, in a geeky sense.
Yes.
Perhaps, like you said, walking around with that pump, or perhaps injecting yourself on a regular basis, because you might be teased. Correct. Or you might be marginalized.
Yes,
so it is very, very challenging.
Yes, certainly.
All important question, can you ever outgrow diabetes? Let's assume you present with the condition at age 6 or 8. Is there a point in your life as an early or a later adult that you can outgrow the condition?
So with adults, in some patients, look, there's a spectrum of patients, and with patients, there's always extremes. So there are extremes that can, to some extent, reverse from being diabetic to becoming non-diabetic, right?
So it's not outgrowing it, it's just reversing.
Yes, it's
with
not outgrowing
excellent management, I should imagine.
Yes, correct. One nice example is bariatric surgery, right? So let's say a patient is grossly obese. So a patient where they literally cannot get out of the bed, etc., because they're so large.
Morbidly obese. So if those patients go for something called bariatric surgery, right, they can, if they've got diabetes, they can actually reverse diabetes and cure it. But that's an extreme case. Obviously, and bariatric surgery is not necessarily performed on someone carrying around maybe 20 kgs overweight.
No.
It has to be at a certain scale.
Absolutely.
Because it's truly a life-changing surgery.
Yes.
They cut away part, or they put the ballooning, or whatever the case may be.
Yes, there's different ways of doing it, but you're right. They either cut a bit of the stomach, or they put in a balloon, etc., or make the stomach a bit smaller, hey? But yes, so that's something that can actually reverse diabetes. But the majority of patients, will have diabetes for the rest of their lives. Unless you pick it up really early and you can reverse it.
Let's summarize. We're almost at the end of the show this morning. We've touched on a lot of issues as far as diabetes is concerned. Sanofi, the company that you work for, is going out into the communities. They're going to do free testing. What about people in outlying areas that do not have the luxury of free testing? What is your message to them? And what is the strong message you want to put out today as far as diabetes is concerned?
I would say know your numbers, know what your glucose level is, get screened. So even if you are in a peripheral setting, rural, deep rural, we've got primary healthcare clinics there, so you can go to your nurse practitioner and
request screening.
Absolutely, and I think the nurse will be very proud of you if you come up and say you want this. And they can also do your blood pressure, they can do your cholesterol screening, they can do your HIV screening, and even screening for tuberculosis, So
the link between what if you present with tuberculosis and you're a diabetic as well? How complicated is that to manage?
It is. Look, diabetic patients can be at risk of tuberculosis because their immune systems are not as strong, especially if you're poorly controlled. So if you're diabetic and you get TB, it's important that we control your sugar well so you can cure the TB. And
the TB doesn't necessarily only present in the lungs. It can present in any part of the body.
Spot on. So in clinical practice, I've seen TB of the brain, TB of the skin, TB of the eyes, TB of the breast, TB in the stomach, the limbs, the legs, the skin, so it doesn't stop. TB can be in any part of the organ, including your spine. Yeah. So just be aware of that, And that's why screening is quite important if you have any symptoms of TB.
Earlier on, you told me that you are busy with some research studies. Yeah. Can you just quickly touch on that? And what does the scenario look like going forward for newer drugs as far as diabetes is concerned?
Yeah. So the heart of what we do at a global pharmaceutical companies, research and development. So we've got multiple phases of trials that are ongoing all the time. And this is where we contribute to scientific knowledge. And for diabetes, we've got a great pipeline as well, innovative therapies that are being developed. therapies that can be given once a week, therapies where we actually put 2 injections in a single injection as well. And it's about simplification for the patients because, you don't want a whole lot of injections, a whole lot of tablets. You want simplicity. So yes, Sanofi is invested in this, and with time, this will reach the South African market.
And the studies that you're involved in at the moment?
Yeah, so there's multiple studies, very exciting studies where we're testing drugs on South Africans for various disorders, including cholesterol disorders, right? And tuberculosis in addition. There's new therapies coming out for tuberculosis. So we're doing some bioequivalent studies, etc. in South Africa. So I think it's exciting times for Sanofi in South Africa in terms of, the clinical trials that we are doing here.
We've talked for almost an hour and you've really shared some very relevant information with us today. Thank you indeed for your time. It's been so valuable. Wonderful talking with you, and we do hope that we have you on the show again sometime soon.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Julie.
That was Dr. Pubala Naidu talking diabetes awareness. The global day is being observed on the 14th of November. If you suspect or if you have a family history, then please get yourself checked out. Still to come on the show, we're going to talk about someone who's overcome all the odds. Welcome back to the second and the last interview for the morning. We have a gorgeous lady, Divine Setumeng, in studio, talking about her story, rising up above all the odds. And as I said this morning on Maulana's show, it is exactly what he touched on, is don't go into the world in victim mode. Don't think that yours are the only problems and your problems are too big to overcome. Look around you and realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you, and embrace all of the blessings in your life, and you'll stop feeling sorry for yourself, and you'll go out and make a difference not only in your own life but in the entire world at large. And this is exactly what Divine has done. She's here to share her story and make a difference. And even if it doesn't make a huge difference in your life, it's just going to allow you to look at things a little differently and to appreciate the goodness in your life. Morning, welcome to the program.
Morning, Julie. Thank you for having me.
You have a story to tell, and it's all about rising up against all odds. How old were you when you realized you're in a very bad situation? Your life is not amounting to much at all. And if you don't do anything about changing something in your life, you're going to be doomed forever.
Well, I just finished my matric. I just graduated. And, as a first child at home, people expect you, family, especially parents, expect you to be whatever they imagined that you will become. So, at the age of 23 years old, I fell pregnant.
Now, let's just go back a step. You matriculated and you're now having to live up to the expectations
of my parents,
of your parents, because they've invested in you up to now.
And also the society.
And even if you didn't go in the field of study that they were expecting you to go, the other expectation is the black tax, is it not? They expect you to go out, work, and help the other siblings and your community and your family to obviously raise them up as well. So you were 23. Did you start paying back?
Well, it's every child's wish, that, because my parents have really done their part as a parent, I should also, you somehow feel like you owe your parents, you owe the society. So you end up forgetting.
And it's the right thing to do.
You see, it's the right thing to do. You feel like, hey, I'm also going to be a mother one day, of which I am. I will also want my child to make me be a proud parent, to beat my chest up in here and say, wow, this is my child. Because we've seen parents crying because of their children. We've seen parents going through, dying and all of that. So as a child, you end up saying, I don't want to be that child. you know. So in that concept, in that thinking of I want to please my parent, you work hard, everything, you even beating yourself up about the things that you do. You end up, you know, when you see your parent, because my mother is that woman who would remind you, she doesn't buy a face. She doesn't care whether you're going to hate her. She will tell you straight. If you wake up around 9 o'clock, she would, you know that you're in trouble. You are in trouble.
All right, so at age 23, you found yourself unmarried and pregnant. How did it impact on your life, and how did your parents respond to that news?
My parents did not respond okay.
Were they angry,
They
disappointed?
were very disappointed, angry at me, and I didn't blame them because my mother, actually, they didn't approve of the relationship I was in to begin with. And I fought for the relationship. I stood for the relationship, but they made it very clear from the beginning that we do not support this man, because he was also a pastor. And then it happened that I found out that I'm pregnant.
And he was married?
He was not married.
Oh, okay.
We were both in a serious relationship. And, you know, finding out that I was pregnant, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, my parents. Secondly, my career. Thirdly, society, you know. And, you know, as a young woman who's not married, there will be other negative thoughts that would come into your mind. Maybe
people
abortion,
will judge you. And
maybe they will judge me, maybe that and that, you know? Because remember, going to the first thing we spoke about, you want to make them proud. And you like, I didn't want to be that child. So falling pregnant at that age, it really frustrated me. I remember I lost my contract. I was about to be signed as an artist. I lost my contract for being pregnant. And not only did it end there, I also, the man who made me pregnant, I also lost him.
he ran away from his responsibilities.
He didn't actually run away. He moved on with another woman while I'm pregnant.
Well, that's technically running away from you. At 23, you lost your contract. You were jobless. Were you kicked out of the house?
When my child was 5 months old, because remember, my parents didn't approve of the guy, which I realized later on that actually my parents were right. I saw what they were trying to protect me from. And then whatever happened, and my mother threw me out of her house.
After baby was born?
My baby was like 5 months that time.
Why? What drove her to do that? Because it takes, I think it takes something huge, a huge upheaval in a mother's life and in a mother's heart for her to kick out her own child. I don't think any mother would take that action lightly because it's very big. Because you're kicking out or discarding a part of your own life. It's like cutting off your own limb.
Well, this is very emotional for me. My mother is somebody who gave you tough love, and she gave me the tough love. She tried all her best as a mother to show me that we are not here. The world is not a honeymoon, you know. And that day when my mother kicked me out, I remember I, without her approval, sneaked out to go and see the father of my child. She found out.
Despite him having moved on
with his life, yes.
With his life and another woman in his life.
Yes. So my mother found out about that. And to make matters worse, I even had to, I slept at that man's house, which was wrong with me.
Do you blame her for kicking you out?
I don't. I don't. I thank her that she kicked me out, because I think she contributed to the person that I am today, because I felt like I can't do without this, you know, this man. I need him. I actually cannot raise this child on my own. So I was trying to fight the other woman, thinking I can use the baby to win him back. You understand? But I didn't see that I was actually driving my family away from me. People that actually really do care, and they really wanna make me who they know I can become. Do you understand? So when she kicked me out, it was for me, I felt like I was in a T-junction of my life. I didn't know if I was supposed to go left, and you know, pride as well, pride. And then one day, my father came to me. I think I was...
But when she kicked you out with this 5-month-old baby, where did you go to?
To the men's house, because that was the only place I knew.
And he gave you shelter.
He did. He gave me shelter even though we were not together anymore, even though I just said to him.
And the other woman accepted you in the house?
The other woman, that time the relationship was in a rough patch between the two of them. And guess what? The woman was his cousin.
Okay.
It was the family.
Sounds pretty messy, doesn't it?
You see? So he left me for his cousin. So that time when I moved in there, I said to him, I don't want to make things difficult for you and your woman. I understand your private life, but this is the situation. This is your flesh and blood. I cannot be on the street. And then he said, okay, you can move in with me. And that time, he already even went to swear at my parents.
He went to fight with them because they kicked you out?
Fight with them.
Yeah, what right had he to do that? I mean, I think your mum was perfectly, in her right to do what she did. She was exercising tough love because she wanted you to take control of your life and get the best out of your life and make a grounded human being out of you.
That's true.
What happened with that altercation when he went to confront your parents? Did it get ugly?
Yes, it did get ugly to the point where the police were even involved.
Yeah.
The police were involved, the protection order came up, and there was a lot of division, and I felt like an outsider. I hated my mother, which was wrong of me. Now I see that my mother has been a blessing from day one, and she didn't want me to make the mistake that she did as a teenager. And then, the police were involved. The man now started abusing me.
Physically?
Physically.
Did you then realize that you were the architect of your own misery?
That's when
and
I
created
realized.
all this upheaval in so many lives just because you were selfish? You thought about your needs only.
And not people who actually care.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go for our first ad break. Quite a story, isn't it? It kind of reminds us how selfish we can be in our youth. We think only about ourselves. We think we are the most important beings on earth and forget about our support system. Sometimes, sadly, it's too late to save the situation and in the process lose those that mean the world to you. But we'll continue the story right after the ad break. Divine Setwing is in studio talking about her story, rising up above all odds. Are you writing a book about this?
I'm working on it because everybody has been telling me that
Okay.
I must.
All right. So this whole issue around you went back to your boyfriend's house and you were hoping things may work out. And you now sit here and you tell me that lots of young people are in relationships and they confuse lust with love. They think that lust is all about love. It's not that. It's use and being used. That's what it's all about. You've gone on and made something of your life against all odds. You are now a pastor. How did you go onto that road, and how do you try and get this very important message to young girls and boys about not making these type of mistakes?
Well, I can say is, like you just spoke about lust right now. As a young girl, you think that love is about emotions. You think about love is about sexual intimacy. And then until you grow up and you realize that actually love includes emotions. It includes your feelings, because love, it means you love these people even. You don't love because.
And part of love is about respect.
It's
It's
about
about
respect,
dignity. It's about
dignity.
how you interact with people. It's how you meet with people. It's how you create those bonds. And those bonds are created on mutual respect. Accepting and expecting and receiving with love and with gratitude. And considering other people's positions as well, where they at.
That's
Are they
true.
happy with this relationship?
Are they happy?
If I go into this relationship, how many people is it going to upset? How many people is it going to hurt? Am I accepted in this relationship? If I'm not accepted, why not? How disrespectful have I been to these people, etc., etc., etc.? How did you make those things right in your life?
I had to make this thing right by actually doing some introspection. So, and you know, there's one thing that people don't understand. It is very good to learn from other people's stories. You see, right now, we are sitting here, we are talking about what happened to me. It might make somebody to sit down and say, but actually, she's right. So I had to go back by actually learning from those that have been through. I remember I used to watch a lot of talk shows about women who've been in abusive relationship, because we stay in abusive relationship with men that we no longer love because we are afraid of the community. We are afraid that, oh, I will prove my parents right. I will prove whosoever right. So I had to sit down on my own, without anybody, without my mother, without my father, without friends, without community, and say, Divine, but what do you actually want? And if this is what you want, is everything around you contributing to what you want to become? If it's not, then it's not worth it. So I sat down and said, do I really need an abusive relationship? No. Do I really need a mother in my life? Yes. Do I need this and that? Yes. Then I said, this is it.
How did you repair your relationship with your mother, number one? And also, talking about abusive relationships, a lot of young women in abusive relationships mistake that abuse that they're receiving as love. They kind of think, oh, it's because he loves me, he's doing what he's doing, not realizing that they're being taken advantage of. You've learned the hard way.
I learned the hard way.
How did you go back to your mother, and how did you repair your relationship?
Okay, so one day I was in church, and I'm cleaning the church at that time. There's nobody in church at that time. And I see the father of my child entering the church. He's drunk that time. When he enters church, Julie, he went straight and strangled me. Like, that was, I don't know if he was planning to kill me or what was happening with him. I almost lost my life. Like you just said, young women stay. Sometimes we even lose our lives in staying in things that are not worth it. So after that incident that happened, and then by grace, I didn't. He didn't. Somebody came and rescued me. And then I also now went to the police station on my own with the baby on my back. And then my father heard about it. It broke his heart. My father came to me and he said, my daughter, is this the life that you want? Is this what we paid, we invested your life on? I know that you and your mother have differences right now, but no matter what you do, your mother did out of what she did because she loved you. My father, sorry.
That's okay, take your time.
My father, I'm trying to keep these tears, God. My father told me that we can't even eat at home because we are thinking if you have eaten wherever you are. We can't even sleep because we're wondering, have you slept where you are?
So they embraced you back in their lives.
Yes, my father said, come back home.
What was the next step in your life in terms of, and I can see this is very hard for you, but it's important that you share the story because it's going to touch lives and people are going to rethink their situations. When did you go on to become a pastor, and how has that changed your life and your relationship with the most important person in your life, your mother?
Well, going back home, my mother was happy. She was happy. I could see the joy in her eyes.
And she never told you, I told you so.
She never, you know, motherly love. So she actually never said anything, but what she did, she called the family meeting. My uncles, my aunties, they were there. They all spoke to me. They all tried to, family counseling, and nobody was actually throwing stones at me, but they were all showing me that this is how you should go. And I knew that I'm supposed to be a pastor from a long time ago. But, as being a young girl, you want to experience. I wanted to be Lepumatosa, just to mention it.
So you wanted to party big time.
You see?
Absolutely. Okay. Next step in your life.
Next step in my life, I accepted that I'm a pastor. Then I started going for training. I started focusing more in the church things. And then I said, you know what? After getting my healing, I said, you know what? Actually, maybe God allowed this so that I can heal and also help other people who are going through the same wound.
And experience is the biggest
teacher.
Absolutely. You've also formed a group called the Divine Sisters, based on your name. What is the core objective of the group? How big a group are you, and how do you go about impacting on young people?
I like your question. Well, Divine Sisters are a group of women from different parts of Africa. We have Divine Sisters from Zambia, we have Divine Sisters from Zimbabwe, Botswana, all around Africa. We have Divine Sisters in UK, we have Divine Sisters in America. And this group of women, we have created a WhatsApp group because we're from different places.
And technology allows us to
Yes,
do weird
it
and
has
wonderful
made
things.
So easy.
Right.
So we come there every day from 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock. We meet, we share the
Online.
word. Yes, we share the word, and then we talk about issues that destroy women. Some of them, when they cry, we help one another. And we're not only doing this after we have empowered ourselves, we now take out the empowerment out to the world.
How do you do that?
Divine Sisters, we also involve ourselves. Like this coming year, we've made a plan that we are going to go to school and do motivational speaking school.
Have you started?
Yes, I've started. I've been to schools in Northwest, speaking to them, carrying them, and we also have it planning to go to orphanages, to the hospitals, because we've realized one thing, Julie, that the world is sick because of this one thing: love. There's no love.
There's one thing that's very prevalent, sadly, in South African society, and that is young girls, teenage girls getting pregnant at schools and thinking it's okay because I'm getting a government grant, not realizing that that grant is not big enough to truly take care of the unmarried mother and the child. What sort of lessons or what sort of skills or understanding are you going to give to those young girls? Because that truly is impacting their lives. Children, life comes from God Almighty. We say from Almighty Allah. But the impact on their young lives, it could destroy their future plans for further education or whatever. That's a strong message you need to take out into the community.
On that, adding on that point, when you say, you mentioned pregnancy, I want people to be aware that pregnancy comes from a boyfriend. Pregnancy comes from lust sometimes. It comes from things that we thought that it is love. That is why the world is full of women who have children or fathers who are not even present. I'm teaching women, number one, I know some people don't like it when I say this, but I'm teaching women, Julie, that we are living in days where society teaches us that boyfriend, when you are married, you've made it in life. We come from a society that don't teach us that it's okay as a woman to build a business. It's okay as a woman to stand up on your own and say, you know what, I can be the next president. I can be the next Miss South Africa. I can be the next, the biggest legend in the world. We come from a society that only teaches go to school, graduate, get married, have children, which is what I'm trying to show the women, that you can actually be a legend. You can actually make it. You don't need a man to make it.
We've almost got 2 minutes to wrap up. Your long-term plans, where are you at now, and what do you see for yourself in the future?
Well, I want to have an academy one day.
An academy of what?
Of women, where we're going to empower women, we're going to change society, we're going to give to the world, we're going to change the world as women, because I love women, I stand for women. So hopefully it is a big dream. One day maybe I can have a reality TV show where we go out there and then we give love to the world.
Good on you. Do you have a website address that people could visit?
I have a Facebook. I've closed down all my website for now, and my Facebook is Divine Lebo Situmeng. That's all we can get me. And my email address, I allow people to email me when they have questions and so on, when they want to invite us and whatever. It's divinesitumeng@gmail.com, small letters.
As a pastor, how often do you preach? Just once a week?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day, Monday to Sunday, I preach. I don't have a resting day.
Okay. Good on you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Go well and continue touching lives and getting very important messages out to not only the young girls in our society, but even the young men. And I think they need to be hearing some very, very solid, strong messages about grounding, about responsibility, and what it is to be a real man. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Julie.
And that's the show for today. Thank you indeed for being with us. Thank you to the production team as well. As always, we wish you a safe journey wherever you're headed for. Till the next time, it is Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Alli. Ya hala, ya hala, ya hala.